So I'm Julianne Lepp, and wanted to reflect today on how big is the table. We know that the Thanksgiving story that we were told in kindergarten or wherever we heard the stories, the myths, that it's not the true story of the Wampanoag or what happened originally. And it's important for us to think about whose stories are told and whose aren't. Even in our own families, who gets to tell the story of what is true and what isn't. And then what does that mean about who is welcome at the welcome table? We generally think of Thanksgiving as a uniquely American holiday, but there's a long tradition of harvest time celebrations. We look at the ancient Greeks who enjoyed a 3-day festival to honor Demeter, the goddess of corn and grain. The Romans had a similar celebration in which they honored Ceres, the goddess of corn. And the word cereal is derived from her name. I don't know about y'all, but I started my morning off with cereal and thought about that. The Roman celebration included music, parades, games, and sports. Sounds a little bit like Thanksgiving Day football, and much like our modern Thanksgiving. And this time around at Thanksgiving, instead of looking at screens and wondering what people were doing thousands of miles away or even just around the corner, it was a joyful day to be here in this building at 12 o'clock on Thursday when about 45 people gathered downstairs and brought corn pudding and turkey and vegan this or that or the other. And we had a feast, and it was more than enough. And I promised Kurt that he could come and even steal his own cranberry roll as long as he left one for me. This is a tradition that I have of love when Kurt brings, is it a cranberry roll? Cranberry orange roll. And it comes from Great Harvest if you're looking. When I moved here in 2010, I was 1,000 miles away from my family and my traditions, my southern pecan pie and my southern sweet potatoes and pecans and marshmallows. And so I wanted to find what my new home in the Midwest would be. What would be the welcome table for me? And that's the beauty of growing, is what are the traditions that we welcome and embody and choose. And that's something a bit like Unitarian Universalism, right? We have our childhood beliefs, and then we come into this place to seek, to choose, to follow what is true for each of us. And hopefully this place can also be a welcome table for pagans and atheists, Christians and Jews and seekers and agnostics. Our welcome practices define who we are. I watched Phil this morning greeting new people, and I listened instead of sharing what my story is of this congregation, and I heard his story. And I think about when I've heard children say, "What is Unitarian Universalism?" That awfully big word. And some people say, well, it's a place where I can be myself, or it's a place where I play with my friends, of course, depending on what your age is. And I like to think I get to play with my friends here, too. I hope you'll play with me sometime. I like to play cards and Settlers of Catan. But what are the wonderful connections that we make when we open up our welcome table? We think about here in our community, the community table, which started in this basement here at this congregation and rotated around different congregations in the Chippewa Valley. When our youth go to serve there, or when we go to serve there, we get a chance to, cut up vegetables and learn how to cook, and we make a meal, but we don't just stand behind the counter and serve it to people. We do that. But then we go and take our meal and we sit down together with people from all walks of life and enjoy a meal together at the welcome table. And what I really appreciate about the community table here in Eau Claire is you don't have to have some sort of belief. You don't have to go through a Bible lesson or get turned away because of whatever you make. They don't have a requirement. You just come. The door is open 365 days a year. And that is amazing. Coming from where I served in different homeless ministries in Atlanta, that's rare. And I just really appreciate that this exists. And one of the things that really is wonderful is on holidays like Easter and Passover, the Christians will serve on Jewish holidays, and I know the mosque and the temple serve on Easter together, and they create their own welcome table across their traditions. So when I think about what it means to be welcoming, I think about a book which is written by Stephanie Speller, Radical Welcome. And it says, a radically welcoming community seeks to welcome the voices, presence, and power of many groups, those who have been defined as the other, pushed to the margins, silenced and closeted, in order to help shape the congregation's common life and mission. And that's a lot of words to say that every voice is important. Today when we recognize that Finley Artemis Canton Beamer Canton, is a blessing as he is a powerful, powerful statement. And to welcome the children to come forward and be a part of his growing up and to think about, who has the voice at the table, whose story is told. And we think about the diverse sources of Unitarian Universalism. Sometimes we have our favorite songs, we have our favorite sources, and sometimes it's really hard to sit through things that make us uncomfortable. But what is it that we can learn if we listen more than we talk at the table? What is it that we can learn if we try that spicy dish as long as we don't have reflux? This is a metaphor, okay. What happens if we can share our favorite rolls? I took the rest home from Thanksgiving that were left over. Enjoyed my last one today. But I didn't take them all, right? So we think about that sharing, that learning, that inclusion. Some of us came from communities that would not have welcomed our beliefs. Some of us came from communities that would have said that we were sinners rather than saints. I was very sad to get an email I found in my spam from a neighbor a neighbor child I used to play with, and I won't share the context of the email, but it very determined that I was more sinner than saint due to my beliefs. And it makes me wonder, what is it that makes us so determined to tell others that they are wrong, that they are not included in the circle of what is good and holy? How different would it have been if I had gotten an email from my childhood friend that said, wow, I am so glad that you have found a calling that calls you to love and include your neighbor. Wow, I'm so glad that you're in a place that recognizes that LGBTQ people can marry and love who they will love. Wow, you're a woman in the pulpit. Good job. Not all those things. And that can be hard because then I myself, find that I want to respond, that I want to not listen, which is okay sometimes. But, how important sometimes is it to let the hate go by? Sometimes by responding, we fall into the cycle as well. And then there's those other times when it's so important that we show up with love. Those other times when we surround our friends. A few years ago, there was a lot of anti-Jewish rhetoric. Right now, there is a lot of anti-Jewish rhetoric. And I've been wondering when it is that we might be called to do a positive picket. Jonah, joining our neighbors, Advancing Hope, went to Temple Shalom, and we stood with our Muslim and Christian and Buddhist and all of our friends, and we did what's called a positive picket. I'd never done one. I thought it was great. We had signs, and we just kind of marched around and said, hey, we're with this community. And we do that at Pride. We do that when we go to multicultural festivals. We do that when we show up at a potluck. We are with these people. And so when we think about that story of, do we have enough? I think about, do we have enough love? And I think about the people that stand up against bullies in schools, that will sit with someone at a lunch table when they're alone. How big is our welcome table? Who does it include and who doesn't it? Even here, what are the places in which we can grow and think and become more loving and listen more? So I'll pass you my favorite rolls and maybe try your dish that I might not like so much and see what we can learn from one another at the welcome table. Thank you.